we understand about what is router, switches, and the hubs, right? So there we understand that router is to do the routing between the one logical network to the other logical network or the different networks, right? So to understand how exactly router is to do the routing, so we need to understand what is routing exactly. What is routing, right? The very first question is what is routing? Then different types of routing, types of routing protocol. Okay, what is different types of routing protocol? What we have here, like what is IGP and what is EGP, and which routing protocols we are going to run within the autonomous system, and which routing protocol we are going to use two different autonomous systems. So to discuss about that, so what exactly the routing? The very first point is what is routing? So routing is the process, guys. Okay, routing is the process of selecting a path for travel from one network to other network. Routing is the process of selection a path for data to travel from one network to other network. Consider this our router one, which is here we have a LAN network. Okay, the same thing we have here two different routers. So in this network, we are going to use 1.0/24. Here we are going to use 2.0/24. So there is a connectivity between router 1 and router 2. And consider this is in our Hyderabad office and this is our Bangalore office. Okay. Now I need to route the data. Like we need to route the data from this 1.0 network to this 2.0 network. So router is going to route the packets from one logical network to other logical network, right? So to do the routing, okay, so if the router wants to do the routing, so we should have some routing protocol to be configured in place, intact. We need to configure some routing protocol here as well, okay, routing protocol here as well in routing protocol. So once both the routers form the neighborship, then only it is going to exchange the routing information. So now in this video, we are going to understand like what is routing and types of routing protocols, what is the difference between IGP and EGP and other routing protocols requirements. So the very first, as we discussed, right, as the routing is the process to select the path for data to be traveled from one location to other location, from source to destination, or one network to other network. In this, like R1's office, we have 1.0/24 network. In R2's office, we have 2.0/24 network. So now here we have, like in the types of routing, we have three different types of routing protocol. So the very first is either we can achieve this with the help of static routing. We can achieve this with the help of static routing protocol, or else we can do with dynamic routing protocol. Right? We have another like protocol is like default routing. So in types of routing protocol, we have three different types. Okay, the very first type is static routing protocol, and the second is dynamic routing protocol, and the third one is we have default routing protocol. So we understand what is routing. Now in the types of routing protocol, we have three types of routing, like static routing, dynamic routing, and default routing, right? I can configure here the static routing. Okay, here also in the static routing, and I can define the manually the neighborship between like the routes from router 1 to router 2 and router 2 to router 1. So it will start communicating between two different LANs. So what is static routing? Right. In static routing, network administrator, actually the network administrator or the network engineer has to be configured manually. So we need to mention that in router 1, hey users, like if you want to reach 2.0 network, so we need to reach first the next hop IP address, and this is the router 2. So that likewise we need to configure the return route as well. So in static routing, network administrator or the engineer manually configure the entries of the routing in the routing table. So the static routing is best for the small, like the simple or the small kind of organization, because there we will not require any kind of dynamic routing protocol. It is a low resource usage, so it is not going to use much resources actually, because if you configure the any dynamic routing protocol, right, every time, every dynamic routing protocol you can consider like EIGRP or OSPF or BGP, it is going to be resource like resource usage, because it is going to be run the algorithm. Every routing protocol will have an algorithm. Okay, every routing protocol will have an algorithm to calculate the best path. Okay, so every time these routers are going to use that algorithm, so that's why it is going to be a resource usage. But the static routing is low resource usage and low overhead, and hence the security, because as the network engineer or the security engineer, the administrator has to be configured manually. We are going to configure manually for this router. Even in router 2, we are going to configure. So even though we have the router 3, we are not going to configure any route. If my LAN users don't want to reach this particular router 3's LAN, then I don't want to configure any kind of static route here. So that only router 1 and router 2 will exchange the routing information between the routers. So this is what the your static routing protocol. And we have a default routing protocol. We'll discuss about dynamic routing because it's a bit lengthy, so that's why I'm going to discuss this default routing protocol. So the default routing protocol is used to be configured for to reach the unknown destination. To reach unknown destination. Consider I have an internet here. I have a internet ISP, internet service provider, and there is a connectivity between from my, this is my WAN actually. This is my WAN. So from my office router to I have an internet connectivity. If my LAN user sitting in my LAN, if he wants to go like google.com or facebook.com or youtube.com, so how the traffic has to be reached, because the router used to be maintain the routing table, right? Right? Router used to maintain the routing table. If there is a no route, there is no route in the routing table, then router used to be drop that packet. It will not forward the packet actually. So that's why what network engineering will do, right? We are going to configure the default routing. If there is no routes are matched in the routing table, just use the default route. Use the default route like 0.0.0.0 slash 0.0.0.0. Any IP address and any subnet mask. If there is no routes are matching in your routing table, just route that packet with the help of dynamic routing, like default routing protocol towards internet. Towards internet. Actually, the default routing is going to be used for to reach the unknown destinations. To reach the unknown destination. So now we are going to discuss about the dynamic routing protocol. What exactly the dynamic routing protocol used to be do? See, to understand the dynamic routing protocol, okay. Dynamic routing protocol use the algorithms to discover the network topology, and automatically it is going to update the neighborship in the routing table, okay. And it is divided. The dynamic routing protocols are going to be divided into two types. Dynamic routing protocol. I'll mention here. Dynamic routing protocol is divided into two types, guys. Actually, one is IGP, interior gateway routing protocols, and the another is EGP, exterior gateway routing protocol. You can see here, dynamic routing protocols are divided into two types. One is IGP and the second one is EGP. In IGP, we have like RIP, routing information protocol. We have EIGRP, enhanced interior gateway routing protocol, and we have OSPF, open shortest path first, and we have IS, intermittent system and intermittent system. In EGP, we have the only one protocol, which is BGP, border gateway routing. So as I discussed, right, in IGP, dynamic routing protocols are again divided into two types. Like one is IGP, interior gateway routing protocol, and EGP, exterior gateway routing protocol. In IGP, we have RIP, we have EIGRP, OSPF, and BGP. But in EGP, exterior gateway protocol, we have only BGP only. So every routing protocol, okay, every dynamic routing protocol use the algorithms to discover the topology and automatically to send the or exchange the updates. To send or automatically exchange the updates. So in IGP, interior gateway routing protocol or interior gateway protocol, which are going to use within the autonomous system, but EGP protocol is going to use between the autonomous system. So every routing protocol will have a like algorithm The RIP is going to use the Bell-Manford algorithm. EIGRP used to dual algorithm. OSPF will use the link state route. It is a link state routing protocol. It is going to be used like SPF algorithm, shortest path first, or Dijkstra algorithm. Even this is also going to use the SPF algorithm. BGP is going to use the path vector algorithm. So every routing protocol will have a different algorithms and different AD values. So if you consider like the RIP's AD value is 120, okay. So I'll discuss this AD value part in the different slide. Okay, let me revise this. So you need to remember this, like, so in the dynamic routing protocol we have again divided into two types. One is IGP, interior gateway routing protocol, and exterior gateway routing protocol. In IGP we have RIP, EIGRP, OSPF, and ISIS, and EGP we have a BGP. So IGP protocols are going to use within the autonomous system. This is the important point, within the AS, within the autonomous system, and BGP is going to use between the autonomous system. So as we discussed, right, so what is the AD value of different routing protocols? So if you take here like RIP, the RIP's AD value will be 120, and we have the EIGRP. EIGRP will have a AD value like 90 and 170. For internal routes, it is going to be used 90, and for the external routes, it is going to be used for the 170. And OSPF, we have the AD value 110. If you take the BGP, guys, border gateway routing protocol, again in BGP we have IBGP and EBGP, and EBGP. So the IBGP AD value is 200, and the EBGP AD value is 20. And the static route, so the very first route we have a static, right? Static routing AD value is 1. So every router is going to be used based on the, like, it's going to be select the from which routing protocol it has to be learn the routes. It's going to select based on the AD values. You can see here, if I configure here static as well as any dynamic routing protocol, here also static or dynamic routing protocol, this router is going to learn this 2.0 route via the static route, because the static route AD value is 1. So whichever the less AD value is more prefer or more secure. So that's why then you are going to configure the routing, right? So you need to be more cautious. Okay, so what exactly needs to be which protocol? So you need to select based on your requirement which protocol is suitable for your topology or your organization, right? So what is the routing? Routing is a process to send the packet from one network to other network. Okay, so routing we need to do in the routers. In the types of routing, we have 3 types of routing: static routing, dynamic routing, and default routing. Static routing, so network engineer or the network administrator has to configure manually between the neighborship between the routers, right? So we have to be configured manually the entries for the static routes towards the destination, and default routes are going to be used for the unknown destination, which we used to reach over the internet or somewhere else, which the router used to be maintain the routing table, right? So every time it used to check the routing table. If there is a no route, then packet is going to be dropped. So that's why we used to have a default route to reach unknown destination. And the second one is dynamic routing protocol. In dynamic routing protocol, is divided into 2 types, like IGP, interior gateway protocol, and exterior gateway protocol. In IGP, we have like RIP, EIGRP, OSPF, and ISIS. And EGP, we have only one protocol, which is BGP. So IGP protocols, RIP, EIGRP, OSPF are going to use within the autonomous system, But EGP is like the BGP is going to use the between the autonomous system. Every routing protocol will have a different AD values respect to the protocol. So the directly connected device AD value is 0. Actually, that is also important, which is going to be asked in interview. Okay, and the static route AD value is 1, RIP is 120, EIGRP will have 2 different AD values, 90 for internal routes and 170 for external routes. OSPF AD value is 110, and the BGP's AD value is, in BGP we have IBGP and EBGP. IBGP AD value is 120, sorry, 200, and the EBGP AD value is 20, guys. So within a organization, we are going to, like within the autonomous system, we are going to run the any IGP protocols like RIP, EIGRP, OSPF, but between the autonomous system, we are going to use between the autonomous system, like see, this is your autonomous system. Consider this is your AS100. We have multiple routers which are connected together in the autonomous system. Okay. Likewise, we have a different AS200. Here also we have a different routers which are connected together. Like this is AS200. So to form the neighborship, to communicate between the two different AS, there definitely we are going to use the BGP protocol, Border Gateway Routing Protocol, which is EGP, Exterior Gateway Routing Protocol. We have only one protocol, which is BGP. Especially we are going to use EBGP because the AD value is 20. If you use any of the IGP protocol, right, either RIP, EIGRP, OSPF, you can see the AD values. What is the difference? So we have 90, 170, 110, and 120. So compared to that, the EBGP's AD value is 20. So that's why everywhere between that, that's why I mentioned the point within the AS. Within the AS, we are going to use the IGP protocol. Within the AS, we are going to use the IGP protocol. Between the AS, we are going to use the EGP protocol, BGP. So that's what about the differences between the routing protocols. So we have the three different types of routing protocols, and we understand what is routing and different types of routing protocol, right? So then again in dynamic routing protocol, it was divided into like two types, like IGP and EGP, and we understand what exactly which protocols is going to work in autonomous system and which protocol is going to work in the different autonomous system. Thanks for watching the video. Okay, to